Hey everyone, it's Drayton from Delay in Block Productions, and I just finished chasing the CSX Medal of Honor Special, which recreated the original route of the Great Locomotive Chase between Kennesaw and Ringgold, Georgia. Now, if you're not familiar with the Great Locomotive Chase, essentially some Union spies entered into Confederate lines, and their plan was to capture a locomotive, run up the Western Atlantic Railroad, and burn down wooden railroad bridges and disable telegraph lines, which would really hamper Confederate supply lines, and also would allow the Union Army to break into Chattanooga much earlier. And Chattanooga back then, as it is now, is a huge railroad hub, and CSX, recognizing that history, decided to honor all living Medal of Honor recipients because Andrew's Raiders, the Union soldiers and spies involved in that whole Great Locomotive Chase, they were the first Medal of Honor recipients. So CSX invited all of the living Medal of Honor recipients and their families to ride this historic train on the original route. And it's really cool because they boarded the train at the exact spot where the general was captured. And the museum there is just incredible. And the real steam locomotive, the General, is on display at that museum. This whole event was kind of spearheaded by former CSX CEO Joe Henricks, and it's really sad because his dome car made its first appearance on the Office Car Special during this excursion, and just one day prior, CSX announced that it was going to be replacing Joe Henricks with a new CEO. And we are deeply saddened by that because Joe Henricks was really a guy that cared, and you can tell, you'll hear later in this video, the employees knew it too. So with that said, I really hope you enjoy this chase. While it wasn't the Great Locomotive Chase, it was the next best thing, and we're really glad that we were able to be there trackside to bring you this footage. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
I began my chase of the CSX Medal of Honor Special at Kennesaw, Georgia, the very place where Andrew's Raiders once captured the General during the Civil War. Just after 1 p.m., the train was scheduled to depart Kennesaw. I wanted to get well ahead of it, so I left early for the Etowah River in Cartersville. There's a famous stretch of track just south of town known as the High Fill, a spot often photographed in the 1940s for promotional purposes by CSX predecessor, the Nashville, Chattanooga, and St. Louis Railway. Leading the way was CSX Pride in Service ES44AC number 1776, designed by Tyler Hardin and unveiled on Veterans Day 2018 to honor all branches of the U.S. military. On this day, the locomotive wore American flags on the nose, waving proudly as the train continued north. In Resaca, I caught the train passing a southbound waiting in the siding, which had a YN2 AC 4400 on the point. Becoming more and more rare by the day, it was neat to see this 90s model GE in original paint. The light wasn't ideal for photography, shaded in at the last moment, but still an incredible sight to watch the train roll through town. Next, I rushed ahead to Tunnel Hill, where CSX trains run through a 1928-built tunnel. But just to the right sits the original Western and Atlantic Tunnel from 1850, the very portal the General and the Texas rolled through during the Great Locomotive Chase. The old tunnel was forgotten and became overgrown with kudzu vines until 1992. Today, it's preserved by the Tunnel Hill Heritage Center, and visitors can actually walk through the original bore. The depot at Tunnel Hill is one of the oldest still standing in Georgia. Built of stone, it opened in 1850. It survived the Civil War and was used by railroad passengers until the early 1950s, when train service was cut back. In recent years, it was lovingly restored by community leaders and is now the pride of the town and is used as an event center.
Wave at the drone there, everybody. There we go. All right, good luck, everybody.
North of Tunnel Hill, the Medal of Honor Special slowed to meet a southbound, allowing me to record this scene and giving me ample time to reach Ringgold for the big arrival. When the train arrived at Ringgold, the platform was filled with members of the general public, local museums and historical societies, state police, and military personnel who welcomed the heroes and their families. One by one, the Medal of Honor recipients would step off the train to applause before boarding buses bound for Atlanta. Local news channels were there to cover the historic event, as well as the CSX media team. We also saw several other rail fans there who we're quite familiar with, including Rail Moments, who live streamed the entire event. Speaking personally here, it was so cool to see a CSX passenger train making a station stop in Ringgold. This was honestly probably the first passenger train to make a stop at the depot since the early 1950s. Much like the Tunnel Hill Depot, this one was built around 1849, and it also survived the Civil War, but just barely. It was a headquarters during the Battle of Ringgold Gap, and it was damaged heavily by explosions. You can actually see where cannon fire penetrated the building. It was repaired after the war, and the W&A continued to use the depot as well as the NC in St. L. It was officially registered as a historic site in the 1970s, and today the railroad depot in Ringgold is still an important landmark to residents. Another fun fact you might not know about Ringgold is it's actually where Dolly Parton got married, and the town is quite proud of that fact too. I mean, I can't blame them because everybody loves Dolly Parton. While the train was kind of inching along here next to the Ringgold Depot, there were probably 5 or 6 drones in the vicinity, and I had to coordinate with some of the other photographers there. CSX had 2 drones in the air. Their media team was present. They actually had a film crew that was riding the train, but there was one local news station there with a drone operator who just wasn't friendly at all, and he was really rude to me while I was flying my drone. I just kind of had a short conversation with him and let him know that if he just communicated with me while we were flying, that we could avoid any kind of mid-air collision. I honestly don't even know if he was aware of our hobby because he really seemed to be overwhelmed by all of the other photographers that were there, and honestly, he was quite territorial about photographing the train. You know, I'm used to, staking out spots with other rail fans and forming photo lines, and usually that's no problem whatsoever, but it was kind of an interesting experience to have an exchange like that with someone from a local news station. But thankfully we didn't have any mid-air collisions or anything like that, and after, I spoke with him about my plan, my flight plan, where I was going, he kind of calmed down and kept to himself. But I was really surprised by how brash he was, and I hope to not ever encounter a situation like that again. But thankfully I was able to come away with these great shots of the train making its way along the depot. They had to really be careful here where they were positioning the train because the handicap access ramp was installed earlier that morning, and it was so close to the train, and they had to get the positioning just right. One, to make sure that the veterans and their families didn't, have any kind of injuries or didn't trip, anything like that. And they just had to really take their time here at the Ringgold station. So all in all, it went off without a hitch, and CSX did a great job honoring these Medal of Honor recipients. What a cool thing to do. The local historical society had American flags just absolutely everywhere you looked. It was truly a patriotic event, and it made me so proud to be an American. And another kind of fun fact, Stryker, Ohio is not very far from where I grew up, and it's actually on the Chicago line, the Norfolk Southern Chicago line. And one of the Andrews Raiders was actually from Stryker. So for me, that was kind of a local connection to the Great Locomotive Chase. And now, having lived here in Tennessee for 6 years, I can really relate to the history behind the Great Locomotive Chase. So what an incredible experience, all because of CSX. One thing I should note is that the train was running a little late this day, and the train crew that was on the locomotive was exchanging a conversation with another train crew nearby, and they were talking about how the train was running a little bit late, but the other train crew mentioned that CSX had let go of Joe Hendricks, and there was a lot of uncertainty in their conversation, and you could really tell that the crew that was on the Medal of Honor train really wanted to meet Joe Hendricks and was looking forward to meeting him, but with the announcement of the new CEO coming in, that just wasn't going to happen.
It's been a good day. A little late on the schedule. It was a good good thing they did. It's just going to be a little bit of a mess getting it back where it needs to go.
Yeah, but that new CEO swap out, from what Pickle told me, he wasn't on, the new man wasn't on there, the governor wasn't on there, it was just the veterans and some of our bosses and some of y'all's bosses.
Yeah, I was kind of looking forward to Joe Hendricks being on it, but he wasn't here today. But well, they had all their families and grandkids and all that from the veterans, so they had their families with them, so it was good.
Oh, okay. You know they replaced Hendricks, didn't they?
Oh yeah, I've seen all that. Yeah, I've met him before when I worked at the radio. I was looking forward to seeing him again today. He wasn't here.
Yeah, he cared about us too much. They couldn't have all that.
Yeah, I know how that is. Money's too deep in it.
Oh yeah. We got a new hedge fund in charge now. I don't know what they plan on selling. There ain't really much left.
Yeah, that's what worries me.
I believe they brought him in here to sort of do a big merger with somebody else. His whole sole purpose.
Yeah, it's probably something like that. They'll probably get this UPNS stuff out of the way and then work on us after that.
Yeah, see, that's what he done to the last company. That big double merger, made big massive corporation out of this gas company.
Yeah, we'll make it through.
Yeah, hopefully. Got 5.5 to get my 30, but I ain't even near old enough, so maybe we'll make it.
After the train's historic stop in Ringgold, it continued north to Graysville, where the locomotives were to be run around the consist for the return trip back to Atlanta. I recorded the train passing the very spot where the general was finally captured on that April day in 1862. This stone monument, erected by the NC in St. L in 1901, marks the very spot where the Andrews Raiders abandoned the locomotive, taking refuge in the nearby woods. After about 2 hours of patiently waiting for the train to come south, I heard the familiar air horn of CSX F40PH number 2 approaching in the distance. While I'd hoped to chase the train all the way back to Atlanta, the fading light would result in this being the final scene in this video. Well, I hope you enjoyed our coverage of the CSX Medal of Honor Special running on the Western and Atlantic Railroad. Just an incredible event put on by CSX. You know, we really have no idea what the future holds for CSX. Maybe another merger is on the horizon with BNSF or maybe even Canadian National. Who knows at this point? But the only thing that we know for certain is that the railroad industry as a whole really misses Joe Hendricks. So
With that said, I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Joe Hendricks, for all the wonderful things that you've done for the railroad industry, for the rail fan community, for all of the amazing special events like this train that you put on for the Medal of Honor recipients. And not only that, but the Heritage Unit program. There's just so much to be thankful for, and it was all because of Joe Hendricks' leadership. So Joe, we salute you and thanks for everything you did for CSX. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next video.